Thanks for joining us here on Eye on Africa, our daily look at the stories making headlines across the continent. Coming up. One of the world's most wanted human traffickers is arrested in Sudan. Kidane, Zekarias Habtemariam, is an Eritrean. He's accused of leading a criminal organization that abducts, extorts and murders migrants trying to cross the Mediterranean. UN intelligence reports suggest M23 rebels in eastern DR Congo have not pulled back from key areas around Lake Kivu. The armed group had promised to withdraw as part of continuing efforts to secure a ceasefire in the troubled region. And a good year for African startups. They raised a record €5 billion last year. But the future is not all rosy, with much of the investment coming from tech companies in the West, where recession is looming. First up to Mali, where junta leader Colonel Assimi Goïta has pardoned 49 Ivorian soldiers accused of conspiring against Bamako. The troops were sent to Bamako last July to provide a backup for a UN peacekeeping mission. They were arrested upon arrival. The pardons come after a visit by Togolese President Faure Gnassingbé, who was mediating on the issue, which caused a diplomatic spat. Last week, 46 of the soldiers had been sentenced to 20 years in prison, with the other 3 sentenced in absentia to death. An Eritrean-national, described as one of the world's most wanted people traffickers, has been arrested in Sudan. Interpol said Kidane Zekarias Habtemariam was arrested this week after a years-long manhunt. The 39-year-old is accused of leading an organization that abducts, extorts and murders migrants trying to cross the Mediterranean. In 2021, an Ethiopian court convicted Kidane in absentia of starving and torturing refugees and migrants in Libya as they were trying to get to Europe. Earlier here on Eye on Africa, I spoke to Siobhan Molali, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons. I asked her how significant this arrest was in the global fight against human trafficking.
This is a very significant arrest. Human trafficking is a global problem, a serious human rights violation and a very serious crime. And unfortunately, it is one for which there is considerable impunity in that there are limited investigations and prosecutions or convictions. So that lack of accountability for this very serious crime means that traffickers continue to operate with impunity and very serious human rights violations occur. So the arrest is important. It has involved several countries cooperating to get to this stage. The allegations that have been made are very serious. The charges that are being brought initially in relation to money laundering are very serious. And it is important in terms of highlighting the range of human rights abuses that may be linked to human trafficking across Africa, but particularly through Libya and in Libya.
Will it seriously hamper, can it hamper what's called one of the most important trafficking routes into Europe?
It is an important step. It's a very important step in investigating this route and the allegations that have been made in relation to what is happening through Libya. And these have been reported now for many, many years. Very horrific stories and accounts of migrants going missing, dying, experiencing sexual violence, rape, beatings, physical abuse, dying en route, as we know, to Europe, but also en route through Africa and in Libya. So it is an important step in beginning to look at what is happening, who may be involved, investigating these allegations and trying to take serious action to hold those responsible accountable. And in doing so, to try to prevent the serious human rights abuses that are occurring.
As you allude to, we hear many of these stories of the tragedies across the Mediterranean with migrants trying to cross. Just how bad is the situation at the moment in Africa?
Well, the situation is very bad in that we have many routes, particularly through Libya, and we have high numbers of people going missing. We have concerns in relation to children being recruited and trafficked across West Africa through the Sahel region. but also in the Eastern Horn of Africa. And there are concerns that we don't have access to reliable data, we don't have sufficient international cooperation to investigate and prosecute those responsible, but also we are pushing people into very risky and dangerous situations. We really need to rethink our migration policies, our refugee protection policies, so that people are not forced to take these very risky decisions and ending up at very serious risk of exploitation. We need to expand safe, regular migration routes. We need to look at effective access to refugee protection through resettlement, humanitarian visas, family reunification, so that we are not allowing these abuses to occur, pushing people, including children, into very risky situations. We can change our policies and practices so that this isn't a profitable industry for criminal networks, so that people can move safely to look for better opportunities and can have access to international protection. But that requires a much more urgent acts of solidarity and much more serious international cooperation.
And that was Siobhan Moladi joining us there, the UN Special Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons. Now, the United Nations, analysts from the United Nations have flagged suspected movements by M23 rebels in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo in areas they had promised to pull back from, notably the strategic towns of Kibumba and Rumangabo. UN documents also indicate M23 has seized ground in other areas of North Kivu province. Jenny Shin tells us more.
It would have been a hopeful step towards peace, but new suspected movements by M23 rebels have thrown into question the future of a year-long conflict. The Tutsi-led armed group had pledged to retreat from the strategic town of Rumangabo in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, following a separate promise to withdraw from Kibumba in December last year. But M23 have yet to keep their word on both, the Congolese army accusing the move as a sham designed to distract from the rebel group reinforcing its positions elsewhere. M23 has already made significant territorial gains since it launched an offensive in October last year after months of relative peace, conquering swathes of territory in North Kivu province in recent months and advancing towards its capital, Goma. Hundreds of thousands were displaced last year in the fresh offensive by the group, which the Congolese government and the UN say is backed by neighboring Rwanda. Rwanda denies all involvement in M23's resurgence, but the accusations have only fanned a diplomatic crisis in the region.
And finally, how's this for some good New Year's news? African startups secured a record €5 billion in investment last year. That is great news for the continent, but analysts fear the future might not all be so rosy, as our correspondent in Dakar, Sam Bradbeast, tells us.
2022 has been a brilliant year for startups in Africa. Not only have they raised more investment than ever before, but according to new research, they also signed 20% more deals last year than the year before. Over the past 12 months, most investment in African startups has happened in South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and Egypt, but there have been success stories outside of these countries too. Here in Senegal, for example, the fintech firm Wave raised well over $90 million in 2022. In fact, as a mobile money operator, Wave is still leading the way in this part of the world. In 2021, it became the first unicorn in Francophone Africa, unicorn being a term for a startup valued at more than $1 billion. Now, although the data looks good for startups in Africa, if we look at 2022, experts warn that 2023 could be more challenging. This is because many countries in the global north face the looming risk of recession, but also because many African currencies are currently depreciating in value. In 2022, more than a third of investment in startups in Africa was in the field of fintech. Experts predict that going forward into 2023, a greater proportion will go to startups involved in health tech, agricultural tech, and also climate tech as well.
And that's it from all of us here at the Iron Africa team. Thanks very much for watching. Stay with us here on France 24.